am not that. What are y'all doing out here?
What up, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Here on this Tuesday, Patrick Wheeler back in the studio, ready to rock and roll. No Zach Lancaster yet, still a little bit under the weather, so we're going to hold it down for him until he's able to get back, which I know he's dying to because he's got plenty to say about it. That's the thing with Zach, is he covers Oklahoma State football so much, he didn't even really get a chance to talk about the game yet. And so when he does come back, I'm sure he'll have plenty to say about that game against Kansas State. And a couple more guys that will have plenty to say about that are going to join me later on today. In about 6 minutes, Rodger Wheeler is going to join. And then at 3:25, Frank Bonner from the Tulsa World will be on. So we'll get his thoughts about what went down against Kansas State. And then in the 4 o'clock hour, Hank Boulanger from the Big 12 Fanatics podcast is going to join me to talk about that. He's a huge K-State guy, so I can't wait to rub it in his face a little bit in the second hour. So coming back, yesterday I gave a full breakdown on what went down in the game and what I liked and didn't like. And I like to look back at the three things that I put down that I really wanted Oklahoma State to do and or needed to see them do. And I put that down the Friday before the game. And now, on Tuesday, I can look back and say, okay, did they do that? And did they accomplish those things? And with a win, usually they do. So the first one I had down was I didn't want to see any signs of regression. No signs of regression and no signs of a double loss coming like Amen Ogbongbemiga had talked about earlier in the week because of that loss with Texas. And I don't think that there was really any of that. We did see an offense that was crippled, to say the least, with no Tylan Wallace. And LD came in and picked up for Chuba. And I think that when you look back on his performance, had LD not done that, you would have been looking at an offense that was struggling even more because they didn't have Chuba or Tylan Wallace, and apparently didn't have Spencer Sanders at completely 100%. So that could have been a lot worse ultimately than it was. That's why I still think Oklahoma State was lucky to claw out of that with a victory. Looking back on it, there are a lot of things that ultimately went right down the stretch for them, and I'm proud of the offense and Spencer for keeping them in the game, but that defense, again, just saved the day before it was all said and done. So I didn't really see any signs of regression. That was a good thing. Number two, I said they got to clean it up. Obviously no more turnovers. Then we know about the kick return, the block punt attempt, all that nonsense that went down against Texas. But the main thing was to hold on to the football and not turn it over. And yeah, they did that. I mean, they definitely did that. And part of the reason that you can win a 20-18 ball game is because you don't turn the ball over. It's plain and simple. That was a Kansas State team that if you turned it over 4 times, they weren't necessarily going to turn those into points like Texas did. Their offense just isn't good enough really to do that. Even if you give them some sort of a short field, you're putting them up against an OSU defense that is going to make a stop against that offense more often than not. So you were even probably going to be able to get with the occasional turnover here and there, but coming away with none is pretty good to see after a 4 turnover effort. That is for sure, no doubt. And then the third one I had was to get Chuba Hubbard back on track. Now, I think this would have been the case had he been healthy. They could establish him more. And essentially, if you have a situation with no Tylan Wallace, then you're really going to be relying on a guy like Chuba Hubbard. And LD just slid in and filled in about as perfect as you could ask for. Chuba gives you a little bit when he was out there. And the good thing about him being on the field at any point is that he does draw or demand, I should say, attention from the defense that will take away from other players. So that's always a positive too. So for the most part, Oklahoma State did what I said would really need to be done to get the victory. But obviously Chuba's injury kind of took away from that third one there. And getting him back on track for the rest of the season. I mean, you look at the situation they have now. They get a bye week, which is absolutely perfectly timed. You come in here and try to get everybody all healthy and good to go. And that includes Chuba, because he needs to have a big-time game in Bedlam. I mean, that's something that if Chuba is not the focal point on the ground, then it's going to be a long game, I believe, for Oklahoma State. And that's not, people are like, whoa, we just saw L.D. Brown. Yeah, I know. But Chuba gives you a different dimension. Now, I'm sure the offense and Casey Dunn, after that performance from LD, are going to find plenty of chances, like they have really all season, to get LD more involved, because he's earned that, no doubt. And it's nothing to me like a split backfield or anything like that, but it does allow you as an offense to run two different styles of running backs. And that's always really important. You know, if you can have, at any level, if you can have two different styles of running backs that are producing on the same team, I mean, Oklahoma State is blessed in that category. L.D. Brown could be a starting running back for a lot of schools. And he's just happening to be on this Oklahoma State team who has arguably the best back in the country in front of him, so that's why, you know, obviously he's not going to be able to get a chance as much as he would anywhere else, but he is playing to a really elite level, and I think he's earned himself a bit more playing time here, a few more snaps here and there, with the grinded out style that he came up with in that game against Kansas State, which was just awesome to see. You know, he's going to get my weekly high grade number one performance is going to go straight to him because he did such a good job. Joining us now here on the afternoon sports drive is Rodger Wheeler. He used to do this with me every Tuesday, and I'm all solo today, so he's going to come back on with me here. But before we get him on, got to play this.
Uh-oh! Someone had some daddy issues. Nothing could be my father from the truth. Who? You said my father. No, I didn't. How? Did not. Shabba! For me, this is a dad issue. Dad issue! Dad! Be dad! Oh. Daddy didn't love me!
Rodger Wheeler joined us here on the afternoon sports drive. Dad, what's going on, man?
Good evening. I was going to say good evening, son, but I guess it's afternoon. What's going on today?
Well, I mean, you could almost say good evening because it seems like it gets dark about this time every day. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah,
now.
I think that's my problem. I'm watching the sun go down, and I don't like it. I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't like it.
It just takes a little bit of getting used to. I don't really hate it that much, but it is kind of weird when I walk out of the studio at 5 and it's almost dark. I'm not a huge fan, so it's just an adjustment thing for me, you know?
I guess. I don't adjust.
I know that. That is true. So before we even get into anything, just go ahead and get it out because you joined me Friday, and you were pretty spot on with your NFL picks. I'll give you that. So just go ahead and get that out of the way.
Well, I don't know why I have to get it out. I want you to praise me. Tell me, that was the best guest NFL picker you've had. Whatever you need to do, go ahead and get it out of your system.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm just saying it was a solid effort. I'll tell you that. I would have to go back and actually see if any of the guests have been better than you. So you can throw that title out there if you want, and I'll just agree to keep the conversation going.
Well, we went to 12 or 14? Was that what I went?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, last I counted. That's right.
Yeah, and we had the upset with Seattle and the Saints, right? Was that a game?
Yeah, the Saints just completely.
No, the Buffalo game. The Buffalo game
with Seattle. Oh, with Seattle. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and then.
Yeah, I definitely missed that one.
Yeah, that one I think a lot of people did. They did not expect. That was just. It's funny because I was looking back yesterday, going through. Talking about what the Bucs and the Saints did, and there has been a time for every single team this year just about that at one point we've said that's a Super Bowl type team. There's been a game where we have just scratched our heads, and that was kind of what we saw out of Seattle on Sunday when they took on the Bills. But the crazy part about it is with them, we know their offense is legit and one of the best in the league, but on the flip side, their defense is so terrible that the Seahawks, I should say, they could get deep in the postseason, but to me, they're one of those teams that they have to play so much offense that they could sputter out at some point because their defense is so bad.
Well, I think that's what proves to people, to me, that's a proof in the whole pie that it's not easy to win a Super Bowl. No matter who you're talking about, how difficult it is. Once you get into the playoff picture, anybody can win that thing because on any given day, literally, those kind of things happen where the Buffalo Bills all of a sudden look like, the best team in the AFC, and then the next week the Chiefs, and it just goes back and forth. And on any given playoff game, if you come out with the right schemes, you come out with the right game plan, you can really shut a team down. And it's hard to pick who would be in the Super Bowl just as a prognosticator, but yet imagine trying to be the team coming up with an offense and a defensive scheme and plan for any given Sunday, and no matter who it is, they might just beat you.
Yeah, it's weird because if you look at it, the last week, obviously with the Seahawks, you're like, okay, they just got destroyed by the Bucks, I should say, the Bills. Basically, the Bucks get destroyed by the Saints. And then earlier in the season, we see the Packers that are rolling. They just get dismantled by the Bucks. The Chiefs lose to the Raiders, and you're just kind of like, okay. And then this past week, we also saw arguably the best team in the NFL nearly get taken down by the helpless Dallas Cowboys. So it's a crazy season, no doubt, with everything going on. And we'll get to more of that here in just a minute. But I want to start with Kansas City over the weekend here. We saw them play the Panthers. Was a healthy Christian McCaffrey coming back, and man, did he look as good as ever to me, honestly. I thought Teddy Bridgewater looked pretty good as well. He is really cemented himself as a quarterback in the NFL that is going to dink and dunk you to death. And if you don't stop that, they're sometimes tough to beat, honestly, offensively. But what do you think about overall in that performance with Kansas City coming in and ultimately just barely pulling that one off?
Well, I think that's where you're going to get to the Chiefs, and teams are figuring that out, that, dinking and dunking, as you call it. That short passing game is where you're going to have some success. If you can get those linebackers, on the play action to draw themselves in, it leaves that lane open. And that's how you beat them. You're not going to beat the Chiefs deep, with Kendrick Ward and with Tyrann Mathieu. You're not going to beat them, you get over the top of them, so you're going to have to beat in front of them. And teams are starting to figure that out. And, with Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey doing those things, it really reminded me that Christian McCaffrey is just a different breed. He really is something special to watch. When he gets the ball in his hand, the first guy doesn't tackle him. And I bet there's not a handful of times in his career that the first guy that touched him is the one that brought him down. And that makes him a success. He's having trouble staying healthy for sure. But I think the Panthers came into this game with the idea, hey, we're not going to hold this offense down. They're going to score their 30 points. We just need to outscore them. And I'm not sure that's not the best game plan. If I'm playing them too, I'm not going to try to figure out a way to stop all their weapons and keep them in the teens. I'm going to find a way just to simply outscore them.
Well, and what overall for the Kansas City defense, what did you think of that? Because I thought that these last few games, I just feel like they need to tighten up just a little bit. They're doing enough to keep Kansas City in it offensively, which we know doesn't even have to be that much. But there's going to be some teams later on down the road. The Chiefs face the Bucks later on. There's going to be some offenses, obviously, getting to the postseason, where if you're going to put up a performance like the defense did against the Panthers, it might be a little tougher to come back.
I think the Chiefs defense reacts a lot to me like any NBA team during the regular season. Hey, we'll just play good enough to get the job done. But when the playoffs start, we've learned that they kind of turn it up a notch. They crank that up and they become a much better defensive team. And to me, that's what the NBA does throughout the season. And I think the Chiefs have literally perfected that to the playoff time. And I don't worry about them come playoff time. I watch them week in and week out, and they look average, and they do some things that makes me shake my head. But I know that come those last 4 games or so, they're going to clamp down.
Well, how about the Dallas Cowboys? They made that game against the undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers pretty interesting, believe it or not. But I said yesterday that I just don't think there was even a Dallas Cowboys fan out there watching that game that truly thought at any point, yeah, we will probably end up winning this. It was just like, why are you teasing us at this point? But Garrett Gilbert comes in and does an okay job, good enough against the Steelers, believe it or not, to keep them in it. But I'm sure you were shocked, right, as all of us were, that they were even in that ball game.
Well, I play in a Survivor League where we pick the one loser. They're guaranteed to lose every week, and of course it was the Cowboys this week. I thought I'd got out of that on the Cowboys, which was really upsetting. But I agree. The Cowboys find a way week in and week out again to lose a game. They will find a way to put themselves closer to the loss column. And I got to tell you, I talked to 3 different Cowboys fans this week about that game, and all 3 of them on different occasions had the same reaction, which I found very interesting. All 3 of them during that game were not rooting for their Cowboys to get the win, but rather that they would get the loss so they could stay down there in the good draft pick.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, but that is what they've resorted to, because there's been the talk of, should they go ahead and just keep on tanking? And I honestly think they're at that point. But I wanted to ask you, too, I don't remember the last time I've seen somebody like Ezekiel Elliott, and I know it was a Steelers defense that's not easy to run on, but since Dak has gone down, he has just disappeared and is not helping them out at all. I know he was a little banged up, too, last week, but my goodness, I don't remember the last time I've seen a player, like a running back or a receiver, just kind of melt down on the field as much as Zeke had since Dak has gone down.
I had the chance to cover Zeke when he played high school football here in Missouri in the state playoffs against one of our teams near here. And one of the things that a lot of the media that covered him on a regular basis was saying that day was that he has this tendency that if he's not the number one priority, if he's not winning, he will begin to shut down. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing. It kind of happened a little bit with Ohio State. Even when he wasn't the main man, it really bothered him, and it's happened in Dallas. And I'm not surprised that he shuts it down, that he becomes just an average player when the spotlight is not on him, and he's in an opportunity where he's trying to win a championship.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's the issue too. He has always been like that. Let's look at the Sunday night game. That was supposed to be like game of the year right there. It was a rematch, right? Bucks and Saints, and Tom Brady versus Drew Brees. Everybody was healthy. Michael Thomas was finally back, and then as if that game wasn't intriguing enough, Antonio Brown gets to get back into the league in his first action for the Bucks. But it was completely one-sided. That honestly might have been, I think it's top 3. I'd put it in worst losses that Tom Brady has ever taken, and that's saying something. He's been in a lot of games, but that was just unbelievably bad for the Bucks. But what do you make of this? Because a couple weeks ago, this was a Bucks team that looked like they had a chance that they could be Super Bowl caliber, right? They had everything clicking. The defense was unbelievably good, but that was just one of the biggest, the most utter meltdowns I've ever seen for a team that was rolling coming into that game.
Well, the commentators, even before halftime, were just, amazed as well at the score and the difference in the style of play that was going on. And I was doing the same thing. I'm like you. I was looking forward to that game all day long. I could finally agree with Carrie Underwood's waiting all day, for Sunday night thing. And there it was on the biggest stage, and only one team showed up. And you kind of saw that deer in the headlight look coming from Tom Brady. And I think anytime you see him get hit a couple of times, he tends to do that. He shies away from what might come after a couple of hits because, hey, we all get older and our bodies can't take that as much. And I think he knows he's one bad play away from the end of his career and that not being the way he wants to go out. So I think he becomes a little timid when that starts to happen. And the Saints had their number. And, I just give hat off to Drew Brees because everybody was wanting to say he was finished and he was at the end of the line, and maybe they should be looking at going a different direction at quarterback. And Drew Brees continues to impress and say, no, I'm Drew Brees, and I'm going to be the one with all the records at the end.
Yeah, no, that was a huge statement game for him, I thought, as well. It definitely was, and Tom Brady and the Bucks just looked like anybody could beat them. Maybe one team that still couldn't is Tom Brady's former team. The Patriots last night just barely squeaked out a win over the helpless New York Jets. Believe it or not, the Jets actually had the lead in that ball game. The Patriots had to come back, and the Jets managed to give the Patriots a chance, and a 51-yard field goal is what got them the victory as time expired. Joe Flacco was turning back the clock, making some really good throws in that game with the Jets. But I want to focus on Cam Newton and the Patriots because earlier in the season, week 2 against the Seahawks, I think we were watching that game together, if I remember right. We were watching the game against the Seahawks, and he looked just incredible. It looked like classic Cam. He was running the ball well. He was throwing the ball well. And then obviously since then it's been just a huge meltdown. Believe it or not, he hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since week 3. He ran 2 in last night, but hasn't thrown one since week 3. So at this point, I know they got the win, but just barely. Is it safe to say that other GMs knew what they were doing by not signing Cam Newton, and then the Patriots might have made a mistake here for this year?
Well, I think the Patriots are always going to go big or go home, and I think that's what they thought they were doing with Cam Newton. But I think it's obvious to me that somebody stole his Superman card, and he's no longer the man that he thinks he still is. And I think he's starting to come to a realization that, maybe I should have, wrapped this up a couple of years back and just gone into, being a hat model or a scarf model or something like that, because he sure does that a lot better than he does quarterback.
Yeah, you're right about that. It's been just an unbelievably bad year for the Patriots so far. Okay, last thing I want to get to you here before I let you go is who do you have in your MVP race right now? Because Russ was at the top of everybody's list, maybe still coming into this week, and it just overall wasn't a vintage Russ performance against Buffalo. I mean, he turns the ball over 4 times, which is unheard of. The interceptions were not good. He usually doesn't lose fumbles. But right now he's sitting at 28 touchdowns and 8 interceptions on the year, over 2,500 yards. And then sneaking up, I think pretty quietly right behind him, is Patrick Mahomes of 2,600 yards, 25 touchdowns, and just 1 interception. But who's at the top of your MVP list right now halfway through the season?
It's hard to put a top, for sure. You've named 2 of the best, quarterback. I would have to throw Ben Roethlisberger in there for what he's doing with what he has in Pittsburgh. I'm not a big Ben fan, you know that, but I would put him up there as a quarterback. But I don't know how you can look away from Dalvin Cook and what he's doing in Minnesota, the numbers he's putting up, with a team that he is their all or nothing. And so far, he is keeping them in playoff hunt mode as well. And, you talk about what's the one guy you couldn't do without, if that's your MVP. And for them, it's definitely Dalvin Cook. I think that's fair enough right there.
Interesting. Yeah, I that is true. I mean, since he's come back from injury, too, he has single-handedly won these games on the back of him alone, and his production has been crazy. I actually was talking about that yesterday with running backs not ever getting a chance to win the MVP. Because if Christian McCaffrey didn't win the MVP last year, no running back is going to win the MVP, I don't think, again, in any of our lifetimes with the way quarterbacks play in the NFL, because I threw Alvin Kamara up there too. Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook right now, to me, should absolutely be considered. Dalvin Cook maybe not as much because he missed a few games, but isn't it crazy to me, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I'm saying definitively right now, I don't think we'll ever see, if we saw a non-quarterback win the MVP, it might be a defensive player, but I don't think we're ever going to see a running back win the MVP.
No, probably not, and I think that's sad because, you and I have talked about this 100 times about the importance of a football team having a lead back, your man that's going to shoulder that load and get his 25, 30 carries, each week, and still going to get you over 100 yards, a couple of touchdowns, and how important that is. Teams are going away from that. They're doing more of the running back by committees, the Thunder and the Lightning. So those guys are becoming less important when it comes to those type of ballots and deciding who's the MVP. And it's, storybook endings, that's just like Patrick Mahomes being the MVP of the Super Bowl last year. I don't agree with that at all. I think he had a great playoff in a year overall, but I would never have, if I had a ballot, I wouldn't have given him the MVP. I would have given it to Williams at running back before I gave it to him. I would have given it to Frank Clark on the defensive side, Chris Jones. Those guys, to me, won the Super Bowl more than Patrick Mahomes. And you know how big of a Patrick Mahomes fan I am.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's a good point. It's just an eye test sometimes, and quarterbacks run the league. Absolutely. All right. Well,
it's the idea of the biggest ring. It's what everybody wants to see on the fiance, and you got to get the biggest carrot you can find and show that off, and that's going to be your quarterback because that's the one that franchises are built off of.
Yep, that's absolutely right. That's Rodger Wheeler joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Always good stuff. Dad, I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you later.
And no problem. Thanks for having me on again.
All right, that's Rodger Wheeler Good stuff, always bringing me his latest NFL takes, always a bunch of good stuff from him, so we appreciate it. Coming up next on the afternoon sports drive, Frank Bonner from the Tulsa World is going to join me, talk about what happened with K-State and Oklahoma State over the weekend and that tough, grinded-out victory the Cowboys pulled off. That's coming up next on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
You can call till your voice is running out, but I can't hear you now. I can't hear you now. I'm somewhere far away where you can't bring me down, so I can't hear you now. I can't hear you now. Yeah, run it back.
Welcome back, Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Patrick Wheeler here on this Tuesday. And joining me now, as always, on Tuesdays from the Tulsa World, Frank Bonner. Frank, what's going on, man?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's. I was telling you there off the air. I mean, a win is a win, right?
Especially in a year like this year where you don't know what's going to happen in college football. So if you can get out the weekend with a W, I guess that's step one.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the ultimate goal every week, and they Oklahoma State managed to scratch one out against Kansas State. And have you ever seen a team? Because here's the thing: when they came into this ball game and we find out that Tylan Wallace is a no-go, I mean, you could just see right away that Spencer looked lost, especially on third down, and then the offense to me seemed like they were a step behind. Have you ever seen a team kind of as lost as OSU really was in that first half without a guy like Tylan Wallace?
No, I don't think so. It surprised me. And granted, I know how good Tylan Wallace is and what he means to that offense, and obviously the offense doesn't run the same without him. But I still expected OSU to be able to move the ball better than they did, whether they had Tylan Wallace or not.
Yeah, and that it was just such a difference. It seemed like, especially in that first half, no points going into halftime. You're like, man, they really miss a guy like Tylan Wallace. Frank Bonner joining me from the Tulsa World, Triple Play Sports Radio Network, and so I want your thoughts on Spencer. I get them from you every week, but obviously not turning over. That's a big improvement. And personally, for me, I wasn't really impressed overall with his performance, and I've heard that he may have been somewhat hurt, not able to throw it all that far. But for now, just for the sake of this conversation, let's say he was healthy. What did you think of his performance overall?
Yeah, like you said, assuming if we're having this conversation as a healthy Sanders, he didn't play particularly well. And especially when your receiver is out, when a receiver like Tylan Wallace is out, you expect your quarterback to be able to make some plays and do some things despite, having your top option out. And he just didn't do that. I know that we always talk about, every time I come on here, I talk about, the fact that he's only had, 14 starts now and he's still young. But, at what point do we stop saying that about him and just say that, he needs to get the job done a little bit better than what he is? And I don't know when we get to that point, but I think we're pretty close to it, to where you just need to expect him to play better.
Oh, yeah, and I'll admit that I was kind of at that point after the Texas game because I thought it was a good performance. It just, stats-wise and getting the ball in the end zone, but turnovers obviously it didn't really matter because of the turnovers. So, but if he wasn't able to throw it that much, then kind of like what we've heard, maybe he was not completely healthy again. If that was the case, then why not make a move to put Shane in? Is it because Spencer could still run it, do you think?
Well, I think because, the team was pretty banged up, obviously. And it sounds like, the ones who couldn't play didn't play, but the ones who could gut it through decided to gut it through. So I think the coaching staff was in a position where if Sanders says he can play, then we're going to play him because, we talk about this every week, the playmaking ability that he does have. And so, the difference in that game could have been, a 30-yard run by Sanders, right? And you're not going to get a 30-yard run out of Ellingworth. Sanders still could have given you that. Mm-hmm. Now, you didn't need that because, L.D. Brown ended up being the savior. But you just never know what he can do for you.
Right. No, I think that's exactly the right answer, too. I think that's why they still had him out there, no doubt. With Chuba also being banged up, how about LD's performance? I mean, I think that without that, they don't win because he's been huge this whole year.
Yeah, and I think LD Brown is I mean, you can make a case for most improved player of the year for OSU at this point. He's had some quality games, and when you need him most, when, Hubbard's out and Wallace is out, he came through. I think, him being in the program as long as he has been, I think is showing in his leadership and what he's been able to do on the field despite OSU struggling offensively. Like, you need someone to kind of step out of the box a bit and be something they necessarily haven't been, and that's LD Brown being what he's been able to do.
Frank Bonner from the Tulsa World joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. As far as the receivers in that game, with Tylen being out, I thought Dylan Stoner did a pretty good job, kind of filling in as much as he could. Obviously, Landon Wolf played well. But how about Brennan Presley? We finally got to see him get a touch, and he turned on the wheels on that touchdown.
Yeah, and I think Dunn mentioned it in the post game. He said, Presley's a talented player, and because he's behind some of the receivers he's behind, it's been a challenge. Trying to get him on the field. I think is I'm paraphrasing basically what he said after the game, but I mean he showed that he's got some talent, he's got some wheels, and anybody who saw his high school, clips and tapes knows that he can play, and I think. If OSU continues to be banged up, I don't know, how seriously, Wallace is banged up or not, but we may be able to see Brennan Presley get some more time in, maybe even, catch some balls or, see him on some other wheel routes like we saw against K-State. But it was pretty cool seeing him get his first touchdown of his career.
Yeah, and I gave that touchdown, a lot of credit to Casey Dunn for making adjustments at halftime, changing things up a little bit. And I give as much credit as I give to Brennan Presley for scoring that touchdown. I also got to give Casey Dunn a ton of credit, right, for changing things up and getting a little creative, try to get in the end zone.
Yeah, you got to give him credit. I mean, if you look at this year, he's in his first year. He's had some hurdles that he's had to overcome with Sanders being out and everything, and for him to figure out how to get it done, like you said, you've got to give him credit. Because if you look at that play, I mean, the blocking was perfect. I mean, it was well executed, great play call. So you do have to look at Casey Dunn and give him credit for being able to get this offense at least enough to get that win.
Frank Bonner from the Tulsa World here on the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Well, defensively against K-State, that was still a huge effort. I mean, and they might have been the ultimate reason, right, that game was in the win column for OSU, and they've gutted it out all year. But I thought the best thing overall to me, I know the fumble was huge and that sealed it, but I thought the best thing overall to me that they did all night was bottle up Deuce Vaughn, because that guy can hurt you a lot of ways.
Yeah, right, and that was the scary thing about it. If Deuce Vaughn gets going and your offense is pretty stagnant, then you've got an issue there. And so, I mean, how many times are we going to praise this defense for being the backbone of a win, right? I mean, this defense is playing their butts off this entire year, and the K-State game was just another example of it. And so you got to also give Jim Knowles credit for what he's been able to do, right? I mean,
sure.
In his first year here, and I wasn't covering the team in his first year, but when I first got here, people were saying that, it was a real rough year for him, coaching in the Big 12, and to see what he's been able to do from his first year to now, it's been pretty impressive. And so you've got to give him the credit, because a lot of their wins, not just K-State, has been on the back of that defense. And, we talked about it before air with the turnover that went for a touchdown. Without that play, Oklahoma State probably has their second loss.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that, no doubt. Coming into this one with Kansas State, there's no Skylar Thompson, so it's Will Howard, and we saw what he was able to do in the few games he played in, and I thought going against a West Virginia defense that's good, but not quite as good as OSU, and he had a terrible game. But what were you expecting from him coming into the matchup against the Cowboys?
I thought, he had some some solid run plays, right? I mean, he got loose, and I didn't know if we were going to see that out of him against this good OSU defense. And so I think he, being a freshman, he didn't play horrible, right? I mean, he played pretty solid. He just had that one turnover. And if you're K-State, you knew if you were going to win this game, you were going to have to win it out and grind it out fashion. And they were on that way. And if he doesn't make that fumble, they could potentially score on that drive. We never know. So I think for him being a freshman, jumping in after the starter goes out, I think he played a pretty solid game, especially since your running back wasn't as effective as you probably hoped so.
Yeah, he did pick up the slack in that category, no doubt. I would think coming into it, this bye week couldn't have come at a more perfect time, right, for Oklahoma State and the injuries?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the saving grace, because if they go into Bedlam limping the way they came out of K-State, you've got some serious issues. So the best thing that ever happened to them right now is this off week, and you hope Hubbard can get better. You hope you can heal on our offensive line, get Wallace back to full strength. And also it gives you a time to catch your breath to just kind of figure out what do they need to do to get this offense going. Because I know we talk about the injuries, and the injuries were a big part of why they hadn't played well. But if you look, through the whole season, the offense really hasn't gotten going in the way that you expect a OSU offense to look like. And so this week gives you time to kind of reevaluate, like, what's really going on here and how can we fix it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And let's take a little sneak peek into Bedlam here. We'll save most of it for when we get you on next week, but let's take a little look into it. I mean, for Oklahoma and OSU, in terms of getting to the Big 12 title game, we know there's still more games to play, but in terms of competition, it kind of pretty much all comes down to this, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does, especially for OU. And if you lose this, that's your third loss. I mean, you're pretty much all but out of the conversation at this point. And if you're OSU, if you control your own destiny right now. If you lose to OU, you open the door for a lot of possibilities. Because the last thing you want to do is get into some type of tie that includes Texas and OU sitting there at 2 losses because you lost to both of those teams. And so, if you're gonna have a second loss, the last team you want it to be is to OU, because then that kind of puts your conference championship goals, up in the air. Because if both of those teams went out, then you're on the outside looking in.
Frank Bonner joined me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. I know OU's defense has been shoddy at times this year, but I'm convinced, it's kind of what we talked about earlier, but I'm convinced if OSU put up an offensive performance like that, specifically throwing the ball, like they did against Kansas State, that could get out of hand, right?
Yeah, it can, because now, granted, we know OSU's defense is solid.
Yes.
But OU is still going to score points, right? You're not going to hold OU to 18 points. And so if this OSU offense can't get off the ground in Bedlam, you're going to be in trouble, because you can only ask your defense to do so much. They can only win the game for you, so many times. You've got to come through and put points on the board. And you're not going to put a lot of points on the board against OU if you play like you did against K-State.
Yeah, no doubt. The last thing I want to ask you before I let you go is we saw the AP preseason top 25 drop yesterday for basketball. And for you, my question is out of that, because we saw a number of Big 12 teams make it as expected and get in that top 25. But for you, do you ever see Oklahoma State basketball this season cracking the top 25?
Man, it's too tough to call specifically for this team, because talent-wise, the answer is yes, right? Like if you look at them talently, yes, I can see them topping the top 25. But they're so young that you don't know if that talent is going to translate right away. Mm-hmm. And so you have to – I'd be able to answer that after about a handful of games.
Okay.
So that I can see, how this young talent gels and all that. But – talent-wise, I say yes. But if the the inexperience is too much to overcome, then it's a no. But I'm going to go with yes right now.
Let me throw you a quick bonus one here to end. Do you think that in the Big 12, is it going to come down to, because obviously the best two teams I think are Baylor and Kansas, but if you had to pick one to maybe run the table there in the Big 12, would you go with Kansas or would you go with Baylor this year?
You know, it seems like this may be unpopular opinion from what I saw in like some preseason voting. Everybody's picking Baylor to win. I'm still thinking Kansas is going to do it.
Okay, that's fair.
Just because it's similar to OU in football, right? Like,
yeah,
they're the king until someone says otherwise. And so as of right now, I'm still picking Kansas over Baylor.
Okay, yeah, I can completely respect that. I think it's sort of a toss-up. Baylor's insanely talented, but that's like you said. Again, it is Kansas. They'll probably end up finding a way. That's Frank Bonner joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Strike. Follow him on Twitter at Frank_Bonner2. Frank, I appreciate it as always, man, and we'll talk to you next week. Get a deeper dive into Bedlam.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It's always a good time.
All right, Frank Bonner. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Frank_Bonner2. Always does a great job at the Tulsa World there. Appreciate him joining us. When we come back, round out hour number one, I want to take a look at one thing that happened in the NFL over the weekend that still continues to amaze me. We'll talk about that coming up next on Triple Play Sports Radio Network.
Whoa.
Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler.
Never told them so. They're watching as I fall. Somewhere down below. Maybe I'm just falling to get somewhere they want. Get somewhere they want.
Wrapping up this first hour. A lot of good stuff already from Rodger Wheeler and then Frank Bonner, of course, joining me there. Appreciate their time. And there's one thing out of the NFL this past weekend, which it's already amazed me a little bit this year, but continues to do so. And that is the Alex Smith comeback tour, because it took the next step when he finally got into action earlier this year. But then this past Sunday against the Giants, Kyle Allen suffered a really bad ankle-ish leg injury, believe it or not. Pretty ironic that Alex Smith would have to come in for him because of that. But you can go watch the Kyle Allen injury if you dare. It's pretty gruesome. But it looks like his diagnosis is just a dislocated ankle, which I'm sorry, but that looked a lot worse than that. So you can go check it out, but man, it's not if you're squeamish. So Alex Smith comes in for him and ultimately finishes the game. It was late in the first quarter. Comes in and finishes the game with 325 yards and a touchdown, which was great to see. The only problem was he threw 3 picks, and 2 of them were really bad at the end that ended up basically dooming the Washington football team against the Giants there. But it looks like as of now, and this is going to be Alex Smith's job, Kyle Allen most likely out for the rest of the year. And it's just really incredible to see his journey finally kind of come back full circle, because this was the last step. The first step was getting back into the game and onto the field, which he did, but then this next final step was to kind of play a whole game and finish up a game. And not only is he going to get to do that, but it looks like he's going to get to do it for a while, the rest of the season. Truly just incredible to see. I saw another picture posted on Twitter this week of someone saying, hey, look, this was Alex Smith's leg at one point, and it just doesn't seem humanly possible. But it was cool to see, because he gets back out there on the field and actually looked like he belonged on an NFL football field again, and that's really encouraging. I think if anyone ever needs a story on how to overcome anything in life, it's take a look at what Alex Smith has been able to do. So I wish him success. I know it's not easy with the Washington football team, but the other really amazing part of this story is just how quickly and how much the Washington football team just dumped Dwayne Haskins. Right, Dwayne Haskins, he comes out of Ohio State, and and a pretty good quarterback. There were some knocks on him, but one of them was his character issue. And he came into the league, and that followed him. It didn't change. There was a lot of time given to him to kind of mature, and he never really did. But wow. The Washington football team just tossed him to the side. It became really apparent when we saw that Alex Smith was going to become the backup quarterback over him. And I thought to myself, man, if I'm Dwayne Haskins, I'm actually considering where I am right now. I'm looking at this as, oh my gosh, I just got put behind a guy who almost died because of the injury he suffered to his leg. And I'm rethinking, I might be done with my career at that point if I'm Dwayne Haskins. So it's really crazy to see. I don't remember the last time I've seen something like that with a quarterback just be tossed to the side for somebody else, because this was next level with a guy like Dwayne Haskins, who, if everyone remembers, when he came into the league, was the next franchise quarterback. The Washington football team, the Redskins, when they drafted him, were going to make him the face of the franchise. He was going to get him back on track. But that seems like it's not going to be the case, as not only is Kyle Allen done, they're not even giving Dwayne Haskins a look. It would actually have to take another injury to Alex Smith to get Dwayne Haskins back out there in an NFL football game for the Washington football team out of all teams. This isn't a wake-up call for Haskins to try to change some things in his life and in his career. He might want to start working on that, because this is about as bad as it's going to get. It's pretty crazy to see. But awesome for Alex Smith. I mean, the comeback story is nearly complete. He can finish this season if he does so injury-free. That might put the cherry on top. May even be able to pull out a good game here and there, because he did look good throwing the ball for the most part, just bad decisions on the interceptions, and that's something he's going to have to get past if he wants to succeed later on this season, as we're now halfway through the NFL year. Coming up in hour number 2, we got Buy or Sell on the afternoon sports drive. Hank Boulanger is going to join me at 4:25, the Big 12 Fanatics podcast. He's a big K-State fan, so I've got a few things to tell him about Oklahoma State getting that win over the weekend against the Wildcats. And then later on, I'm going to tell you what I learned today here on the afternoon sports drive. All still to come on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Hour number 2 right around the corner.
I don't wanna wait for our life to be over. You have what you take it how you left it. This is give and take. Take your time, take me under.
It's the afternoon sports drive, hour number 2.
What I'm missing.
Coming up.
In the plane out of Southern California, running in the streets all day. I guess some of us just gotta learn the hard way. And give a damn, nobody gotta say we selling out. I don't wanna wait for
Patrick Wheeler here on this Tuesday. Hank Boulanger coming up at 4:25. I think good stuff coming up with him. But before we get to him, starting off this second hour, as always, it is time.
Are you buying?
I'd buy that for $1.
Or are you selling?
You'll pick up the phone and you'll sell, sell, sell.
This is Buy or Sell on the afternoon sports drive.
Make money, money, make money.
Buy or Sell, afternoon sports drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler, number 1 on the list today. So I saw earlier where Duke has already announced that there will be no fans for Cameron Indoor Arena for the games this year, Duke basketball. And when you think about venues for college basketball, Cameron Indoor is about as intense and in your face as it gets. And they're so well known. If you ever watch a game, right? You inbounds it from the sideline, and you got all the fans from every direction pointing the arms at you. It's a really cool display. A lot of good stuff. I mean, and the question is here on Buy or Sell, do you buy or sell that having no fans in basketball arenas like that will affect teams' performances? I think it's an interesting viewpoint, because it's different than college football. College football is, sure, there's a lot of positives that come from having a full stadium, and momentum can certainly change with a crowd's presence or lack thereof. But basketball, the arenas, it's so much more different because of the intimate setting that a lot of these arenas provide. It's a lot more, up close. and big-time basketball rivalries, a lot of how a team ebbs and flows on that day can be credited to a packed-out arena. So I certainly think it is going to be different for college basketball than college football. We have seen, so when the NBA did their bubble this year, they piped in the noise, and that helped from a TV standpoint. But I wouldn't really want to be necessarily in the arena if there were no fans, if I was a player. I think that would be really, really tough. Yeah, it's because if it's going to feel like a pickup game. That's what it would feel like to me. Like I'm over there at the YMCA, and there's nobody in the stands, and we're just having a pickup game with my buddies. And a lot of these kids at top-tier college basketball schools, for instance, like Duke, they come from high schools that have a ton of fans, and they sell out games all the time. And they're used to having the crowd present and cheering them on for everything they do. Not the case now. So do I buy that it will affect teams' performances? I think initially, yeah, I'm gonna buy that. I really am. It's something that you're going to have to work a ton on this offseason to get used to. I think before when it's all said and done, that the play on the court is going to come down to what ultimately affects the outcome, and I'm sure that some teams will adapt. But having a nearly empty arena, especially in a rivalry game, like Duke, North Carolina is going to be, that's just not the same, man. That's going to be weird. And Oklahoma State, I think there's talks of having a few thousand in Gallagher-Iba. But it's just, to me, I hate to see it specifically here at OSU because you have a guy like Cade Cunningham who very likely could be a once-in-a-lifetime type player to come through this team, this school, and there's barely going to be anybody in person to cheer him on. I've heard things about Gallagher-Iba and not having a lot of fans anyways, but I'm firmly believing that this year, if there were a normal amount of tickets available and it was a normal setting, that there would be a big-time bump in attendance to see this team and to see Cade Cunningham. Right? I mean, when schools like Oklahoma State, they sign someone like Cade Cunningham in a normal season, that is basically signing, we're going to pack out arenas. I don't believe anybody that would tell me that they wouldn't pack out Gallagher-Iba all the time this year if they could to see him play. I just don't believe it. I would have to see that to officially believe it. But it's going to be weird. College basketball, no doubt. There's just something about game day in a college basketball season where whether it's a rivalry or not, it's just a good game. Top 25 matchup, and the fans just play such a huge part in the overall atmosphere. And that's not to say that college football hasn't been weird with some of the places that don't have fans. I mean, there's still teams in the NFL that don't have fans in the stands for whatever reason. I think it's ridiculous by this point. But it's weird to see. And I would not, I'll say this, I would not want to be a player in that atmosphere, in that environment. I think it would throw me off just a little bit, especially at the beginning. Initially, it would throw me off. It would take some getting used to. The best players, I'm sure, if I were to ask Cade Cunningham right now, say, hey, man, is that going to be an issue? His answer would be, no, I'm not even going to notice, man. It's not going to be a problem. I'm going to go out there and play my game. And that's the right answer. But I have to believe there's a bit of a difference that he's going to notice there early on. So, yeah, I'm going to buy it initially. I think so. Second one, buy or sell that Joe Flacco should remain the Jets quarterback. He put on a decent performance last night. The Jets are absolutely just terrible. But he nearly beat the Patriots. And then that never happens. But you look at what happened last night, and he's making really good throws. He's making accurate throws. He's making tough throws. And I was all for it, man. Like seeing Joe Flacco, it reminded me of old Joe Flacco. And we had already seen him once this year, and there was not really anything to write home about. But this game against that Patriots defense, who I have to believe, without Stephon Gilmore, it played a decent part in it. but he still was able to get it done. The only problem was, did he look good for most of the way? Yeah, but he was basically the reason that the Patriots even had a chance at the end. I'm watching that game and I'm thinking, at some point, Joe Flacco is going to turn back into Joe Flacco. And he did. He did at the end. It was a bad interception, and it ultimately led to the Patriots being able to erase a 10-point deficit and get a chance to come back and win the game. How about the Jets just running 4 total plays in the fourth quarter? I don't even know how you do that. So Sam Darnold's going to come back next week, but do I buy that Joe Flacco should remain the Jets quarterback? I mean, why should Sam Darnold be the number 1 guy? What has he done that's so much better than what Joe Flacco just put on this year? He obviously gives you a little bit more escapability. He's more mobile. He can make plays on the ground. But at this point, if I'm the Jets, and here's the reason why they won't. They looked at this last night, and you know that the Jets were biting the fingernails on the sideline. Say, oh my gosh, if we win this game, that's not good for us, and trying to get Trevor Lawrence, that's not good for us. And they were thrilled that they ultimately ended up losing the game. I mean, they put a product somewhat out there on the field every Sunday, but don't get it twisted. The goal is to go 0-16 at this point. Halfway through the season, you're 0-8. The goal is to go 0-16. At this point, the biggest plus that can happen for your team is to get Trevor Lawrence and start over. So don't think that the Jets aren't just thrilled every single time they lose, because they are. It's good for them. Seeing that game come down to the wire, they were certainly hoping on that sideline that 51-yard field goal would be good for the Patriots. I'm telling you they were. Adam Gase, maybe not, because he's not going to be there anyway next year, so maybe he doesn't care. But the rest of the Jets organization has to be thrilled every single time they lose. So that's why I'm going to sell this. I think that Sam Darnold is overall going to probably play worse than Joe Flacco. So at that point, you put him back out there and just hope that he continues to lose games. And hope that the offense can't do anything and keep getting beaten by teams. And he gives you your best chance probably of going 0-16. You might accidentally toss Joe Flacco back out there, and he may squeak out a win, believe it or not. Last night, you couldn't have told me coming into this season, I never would have guessed that the Jets, one of their best opportunities to win this season would be against the New England Patriots. Never would have guessed. I went down the list a few weeks ago and circled some of the games they had the best chance to win, and they had the Broncos. That didn't work out. And then the Dolphins. But now the Dolphins have turned into a competent football team. The Patriots were maybe their last really good shot, and they blew it. But they're happy about it. So I'm going to sell it. I think they stick with Joe Flacco, if anything, or Sam Darnold, if anything, just because he gives you the best chance of going 0-16. I'm done with Sam Darnold. I'm giving him enough time, and maybe he pulls a Ryan Tannehill someday, gets away from Adam Gase, and goes to a different team and blossoms. But he's not that good. He's just not good. And people have asked the question, I think it's an interesting topic, is Trevor Lawrence, if you were him, would you come back to school? Or would you go to the New York Jets? And I don't think, if I were him, I seriously would consider it. But who's to say, first of all, that when you're the first-round pick the year after, the Jets aren't right back there? Nothing about this team tells me that they're not going to have the first pick coming up in the next draft. So if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I think I'm stuck in a pretty bad position. And he knows that, if anything, he has to hope that with the coaching change, he goes in there and is the start of the rebuild, and then all of a sudden some players get around him, and he's able to push the Jets in a positive direction. But if not, he can just leave when his rookie contract is up. He's going to make some money. He's going to make plenty of endorsement deals in New York. There's going to be a lot that's going to go right for him, but he can only control so much on the field with the lack of talent at all on that ball club. So maybe, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I'll say this now, I think he'll go to the Jets. I don't think he'll go back to Clemson. There's really no point other than just avoiding New York, but this is such a bad team and such a bad franchise that even if that happened, you would probably end up on that team anyways. And Trevor Lawrence does not strike me as the guy that's going to come in and pull an Eli Manning. This is going to be, he's going to come in and say, I'm going to do that. He's going to say all the right things. He's going to come in and say, I want to help this team. I want to be this team's quarterback. I'll be thrilled with anybody that takes me, right? That's what all the quarterbacks say every single year in the draft. They get asked about what team they want to go to. Hey, man, I'm just thrilled for any team that gives me a chance. Come on. Trevor Lawrence is not thrilled when the New York Jets give him a chance. Trust me, he's not. Who would be? Poor guy, right? Poor guy. It'll be really interesting to see what he does, but I have to believe he's going to go with New York. The Jets nearly squeezed one out last night against the Patriots, who, my goodness, are just absolutely terrible. Coming up in just about 5 minutes, Hank Boulanger is going to join. And at some point, I'm going to try to get to my top 5, bottom 5 currently halfway through the NFL season. And then I'm going to give you what I learned coming up at the end of the show here on the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network. We're back with Hank Boulanger after this.
Like I'm gonna puke, cause my taxes are due. Do my password begin with a 1 or a 2? Been a hell of a ride, but I'm thinking it's time to grow.
Metronome.
Man, I'm up to something.
Welcome back into the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler rocking and rolling here on this Tuesday. And join me now, host of the Big 12 Fanatics podcast, and my good friend Hank Boulanger. Hank, what is going on, my man?
Oh, not a whole lot, man. What are you up to?
Well, we've just been, enjoying that Oklahoma State victory over Kansas State over the weekend.
I'm sure you guys are. I'm sure it's a good day, good weekend in Stillwater. I'm sure it's a good rest of the week in Stillwater.
Yeah, I figured I would just go ahead and bring that up early. And I let everybody know earlier on when I said you were coming on, your big K-State guy, and with that game going the way it did. Okay, at halftime, when there's no points on the board for Oklahoma State, how confident, be honest with me, how confident were you that Kansas State was going to be able to hold on and win that thing in the second half?
100% honest with you, Patrick. We had to put up another 21, I thought in my head. I wasn't super confident, to be honest with you. Our defense was playing really good, so I was like, if our defense continues to play that well, we'll have a good shot. And I knew Oklahoma State would score. I knew they'd go down the field. I know they'd start to figure it out. They'd make adjustments, and they did, and it worked out for them. Now, I know they're missing some, key players, obviously. So, K-State had a little bit of advantage there. But the confidence for me, I really wasn't there because I knew our offense was struggling, with freshman quarterback Will Howard. It's not clicking like it was with Skylar Thompson. Obviously, he's a freshman guy.
Yeah.
So, I wasn't confident. To me, if I was in the locker room and I was Coach Clymer for K-State, I would say it's 0-0. You got to play like it's 0-0 because I knew they were going to come back, and obviously they did.
Yeah, that's a good point of something that he should have been telling them, no doubt. Well, speaking of confident, you mentioned there with Will Howard. When Skylar Thompson did go down, how I've talked to a couple of K-State guys, obviously last week, and I asked them the same thing. But when that happened, how confident were you that Will Howard was going to be able to step into that role as a freshman and be able to kind of keep K-State on the right track? Because at that point, and still coming into the Oklahoma State game, they still had a slight chance to kind of be there at the end.
Yeah, my confidence with Will Howard actually, Patrick, was really good, and it still is good. I'm still optimistic, but Patrick, one thing about K-State fans that a lot of this past few years, my father is the perfect example of this. We like Skylar Thompson, but he does small things that, as K-State fans that we, don't love. His pocket presence isn't amazing. He makes some mistakes. He overthrows a lot of guys, and that's kind of the way that Skylar Thompson's played. He kills you with his legs and his athleticism and his smart decision making. That's how he's a good quarterback. But with Will Howard, with everything that people were talking about him, we were really excited for him to get on the field. And so when Skylar got hurt, obviously I was upset. I would prefer Skylar Thompson start over Will Howard. But no one was like, oh man, it's Will Howard. We were pretty happy to see this freshman go, and so far it hasn't yet for Cats clicked yet. It hasn't gone. I'm confident that it will. A lot of people are already pretty hard on him, but he's made some freshman mistakes. But I know that he'll get it fixed up and he'll be good to go here soon.
Yeah, well, he went up against a West Virginia defense that's pretty good, but and had a tough game, and that's why I kind of thought coming in, okay, he had a tough game against that West Virginia defense, and Oklahoma State's defense is playing otherworldly this year, and if he comes up against them, it could be worse. But man, he came out and throwing the football wasn't all that great, but running it, I think he really impressed, and that's certainly what I saw out of him. With that being said, in the run game, though, that Kansas State brings, I mean, Deuce Vaughn, I know he got bottled up, and that's a tough defense to run against, and Oklahoma State, did a good job of taking him out of the game, but he's fun to watch, man. Isn't it something how we're seeing now in college and the NFL, kind of that resurgence of the small, shifty type running back like that can run between the tackles and squeeze through, but can also catch it out of the backfield?
Yeah, absolutely. Deuce Vaughn is one of the greatest pickups that K-State's had. He reminds you of a Darren Sproles. Super short, really fast, can just, make guys miss, and he can break tackles very well. He's everything that you want in a running back. And it's perfect because those small running backs behind those huge offensive linemen, they're hard to see. And so Deuce Vaughn is a great pickup for K-State. He's going to be one of the best running backs in the Big 12, I think, here in the coming years. I'm so excited for his future. But Oklahoma State did a really good job at keying on him. I don't think K-State did a good enough job at trying to find ways to get him open in space. But then luckily, Will Howard kind of stepped up in, certain areas. But, man, Deuce Vaughn is going to be a great K-State football player. I'm so excited for the future. But, again, Oklahoma State, they did their job. They keyed on him, and he didn't have as good of a game as he should have had.
Thank you, Boulanger, joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Yeah, I definitely got that Darren Sproles vibe off of him, too. And, looking at Kansas State in that game, and they come in with obviously injury at the quarterback, but you look at Oklahoma State on the other side, and you find out about an hour before, okay, it looks like Tylan Wallace might not play. And none of us, we're sitting here like, okay, we hadn't heard that being an issue at all this week, and that just kind of popped up. And they even said at one point that the running back L.D. Brown wasn't going to be out there. But Tylan ultimately didn't. He went out there for one play on the kick return there on the onside kick. But other than that, he was not in the game. So when you heard that, what were you thinking in terms of maybe that might just help us out here a little bit and getting a win?
Yeah, exactly. I knew right away because he's such an X factor, Patrick. He can change a game in a second. And with our defensive backs being kind of banged up and not great, but not awful. I know he could beat us up pretty good. So with him being out, I knew that it gave us a little bit better chance because I think we could contain Chuba Hubbard a little bit better because of that. So, in which we did. Hubbard didn't have a great game. He got hurt a little bit too. So, I thought the defense, it definitely helped the defense a lot. And yeah, with Chuba going down and Tylan Wallace being out, it was super beneficial for our defense. But hey, Brown looked pretty good. There was a few runs that he runs hard. He's definitely overlooked. He's got one of the best running backs in the country right in front of him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's the exact same thing I said earlier, is that he's going to start on a lot of other teams in college football and really has done a great job this season for the most part. And he was playing banged up too, and it was just without that performance, I don't think Oklahoma State wins that game because otherwise offensively they looked really stagnant. And it was just without Tylan out there, I don't know if I've seen a team as lost as Oklahoma State was for the most part without him. And with that being the case, this was probably because, as you said, you had Chuba banged up, you had Tylan out of the game, and there was word, too, that Spencer was maybe not 100% back there at the quarterback spot. And so this was the best opportunity probably for Kansas State to strike. If Skylar Thompson was the quarterback in this game, do you think Kansas State comes away with a victory with the way that OSU performed?
100%. 100%. I think if Skylar Thompson was on quarterback, at that time, at this time, I should say, K-State gets the win, 100%. Especially just with how good the defense played. Skylar Thompson didn't have to have a great game in that game to beat Oklahoma State, just because our defense was stepping up. So without a doubt, I think Skylar's playing. I think we trickling those field goals in for a touchdown possibly, and then hopefully he wouldn't have fumbled like Will Howard did.
Yeah,
it's just small things that you miss out of a senior quarterback and a leader. And Pat, I'm so impressed with how K-State played, especially after that loss to West Virginia. I was livid. I was so upset because it was one of the worst performances I've seen a K-State team play against West Virginia. And they come back and they play a good Oklahoma State team and they just play hard. I mean, man, at the end of the game, Patrick, I was like, man, we played better than Oklahoma State. Really, if you think about it, we played better. They just ended up getting a few breaks, and they, when they scored when it counted. And so you got to give props to this to the Cowboys. But I thought our defensive line tore up your guys' offensive line for the most part. But again, you guys did what you needed to do to win.
Yeah, I don't know if you knew this, you wouldn't believe it, but OSU has lost 7 offensive linemen this year to injury.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
That's tough. And K-State's defensive line is definitely their high point this year, too.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because, man, I like watching Wyatt Hubert. I mean, that kid, and he reminds me of he gives me the Clay Matthews vibe a little bit. And it's not just the hair, okay? It's the play style. I mean, he is, his personality on the field is fun to watch. He is, really good at getting in the backfield and dominating the point of attack there. But I mean, he's got to be one of the top guys to watch out for in the Big 12 defensively.
Yeah, he's just all around. You hit on the point. He's just all around a good guy, a great leader. Just a Kansas. I think he's from Topeka, but just a great all around defensive player, great leader. I mean, he's everything you want in a defensive lineman. I mean, the energy he brings to the defense is, you got to have somebody on their team like that, and he really fills that role. And with him being on the defensive line, it allows guys like Duke to go in there and get some more plays, or Drew Wiley to go in there and get some more plays. So he's really helped out a lot with the defensive side of the ball, especially this year when our offense has struggled. So it's kind of helped out that he's been out there and being the leader that he is.
Hank Boulanger joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. So it seems now, all eyes are still going to be on Texas, and then obviously Bedlam coming up for Big 12 title hopes. But how 2020 would it be for Texas and OU to somehow find a way to play in the title game after the seasons they've had, right?
You wouldn't think so. Patrick, I don't think Texas is that good of a football team. I mean, they got a break and they beat Oklahoma State. That was a really good game that they played. But, man, Pat, I watched this Texas team, and I'm not super impressed. They're just very inconsistent, And so it's going to be tough now. I think Oklahoma State, with that win against K-State, as long as they don't, lose some games they should win they should go to the Big 12 championship. Now, for that, who they're going to play is going to be very interesting to see. It could be Iowa State, it could be Texas, it could be Oklahoma, it could be K-State. I mean, man, it's a very competitive Big 12 this year, and that's one thing that the media, Patrick, has just drove me crazy, is how much talk people are talking about the Big 12 being awful this year. And yeah, it's not. We don't have one solid team, but we have multiple decent teams that are just beating each other up and competing really well. And as much as you hate to see that, because, man, we're not going to have anybody go to the college playoff, it brings a lot of pride with us in the conference saying, man, hey, we're definitely the most competitive conference in the Power 5 right now.
Yeah, no, I think it's fair. I mean, I look at, and that's what I mentioned with Oklahoma State before, is that the Big 12 hasn't done, hasn't done Oklahoma State any favors in terms of when they were still, an undefeated team, because we know how the playoff committee acts, and they look at it and say, well, I mean, look at the Big 12. I mean, come on, do we really want a representative there? And then you saw what happened over the weekend. Notre Dame gets to win over Clemson, and we all know that the playoff committee would have no problem throwing 2 ACC teams in, and certainly no problem throwing 2 SEC teams in. So there's certainly going to be a lot of interest when that comes out. But I think it's I'm with you. It's been a pretty competitive season overall for the Big 12 for the most part. At the top there, those teams you mentioned have shown and maybe shut some people up. You might be onto something there. Let's look over to the Big 12 basketball season real quick, because we just got the AP poll dropped yesterday. And, for Oklahoma State, there's been plenty of excitement with Cade Cunningham coming in. And I have to think that even as a K-State guy, you got to be pretty excited to see someone like him play, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. 100%. I mean, this Big 12 basketball year, first of all, I'm really curious how everything's going to go down with COVID, but and see how they make the changes. I mean, college football definitely pulled it off, so I know Big 12 basketball pulled it off as well. But just overall, real quick, my Big 12 basketball, I'm really excited. I'm excited for it. I mean, Oklahoma State, if I'm not mistaken, they still have that suspension, right?
Yeah, so they got the sanctions put on them, and they're appealing right now. So what we've learned is that if the appeal process continues on, by the time the tournament rolls around, they can still be eligible for the tournament.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, hopefully, because if I remember right, I feel like the suspension was, I don't know if it was a good suspension.
It was ridiculously bad, man.
Of thing. So I really hope that goes and works out. Because Oklahoma State, I mean, it could be a big year. It could be a really big year for the Cowboys, and see how they can do in their future this year is going to be important, and to see how they can do later on. But I mean, KU obviously looks pretty good, Pat. I mean, they got their recruits, and they're, I think, number 6 is what I think I saw them at.
Yeah, I think that's right. I had Kansas, Baylor, Texas Tech, West Virginia, and Texas, I believe, all made the top 25. And you mentioned Kansas there, who, and I brought this up to one of my guys earlier and asked him if they would choose Kansas or Baylor as the top Big 12 basketball team this year. So if you had to choose between those two, who would you say is the better team?
I mean, I'd want to say Baylor just because my hatred for KU. But, Bill Self, continuously does a great job with this program. And, Pat, even though I can't stand KU, I mean, every year they always prove me wrong and do something crazy. But, man, I'm really starting to think a trend is starting to go down now, Pat. I think Big 12 basketball is starting to get a little bit more competitive, just kind of like football this year. But consistently, I think we're going to start seeing KU decline a little bit, and we'll start seeing emergers like a Baylor or, maybe like an Iowa State or a Texas Tech. I think it's going to start getting a little bit better and more competitive. I think we're going to quit seeing KU winning 10 Big 12 championships in a row, or however how much it was. But I'm really hoping for that, and I'm hoping the Wildcats can somehow figure it out how their basketball. It's going to be tough. It's going to be really brutal. But
I mean, I think the Big 12 overall is right now they are certainly up there with one of the most competitive conferences. Power 5, you look at the Big 10 and the ACC obviously are there too, but the Big 12 has made their case, no doubt. I think it's a scary Baylor team though, man. Just like last year. They're arguably the best team in college basketball coming in. And with that being said, you see that Gonzaga gets the number 1 spot. And I want to ask you about what you feel about that, because every time when something like that happens and they're ranked up there preseason pretty high, I'm always thinking to myself, we've seen them in the tournament have competitive teams, but with the quality of teams that they play is really not that great. So, I mean, how much stock do you put into them being ranked the number 1 team in the country?
They're like you said, I think they're definitely a good team, and each year they have a decent team. But at the end of the day, they don't play the teams that the teams the Big 12 play, the teams the Big 10 and the ACC play. I mean, their competition is so much lower, and so honestly, I think that hurts them, towards the end of the season. But I'm kind of used to it now. It's kind of like Texas football being ranked every year. I'm kind of used to it. I'm like, hey, they're there, but they probably don't deserve it. Yeah. And so not that Gonzaga doesn't deserve to be ranked high. Number 1, I think it's definitely a push. But they're a good team. You never know. I mean, one year I thought they were really overrated. They went to the national championship. So
sure,
it can happen.
Hank Boulanger joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive. Let's flip it over to the NFL real quick. What in the world is up with this version of Tom Brady that we're getting this year? Because we knew he was going to come in, and there were going to be a lot of questions about how he worked out with that Bucs team. Certainly, the weapons were there for him to succeed. But at this point through the season, halfway through, we're kind of at like this option where we don't know which one we're going to get. Or are we going to get the really solid play from Tom Brady that he had earlier in the season, or are we going to get whatever the hell that was against the Saints on Sunday night?
Yeah. Patrick, I don't care how good of a player you are. Patrick, if you're with a coach or an organization for a very long time and you go to a different team, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. I think people were kind of, he had a few good games like, oh, man, he doesn't need Bill Belichick. He does. I think he needs Bill Belichick to succeed really good. Now, I still think he's a good quarterback. I still think, Tom Brady's a very good quarterback, one of the best to ever play. But that being said, when you're uncomfortable like that, when you don't have the guys around you that you're so used to, it can kind of just feel alone. I think he just kind of starting to hit him a little bit now. But man, that performance was not good.
Well, no, and what we saw was in that first performance of the season against the Saints, there was the easy excuse that was, hey, when you look at what Tom Brady did, maybe he's not gelling with his guys, and that was fine. That was the way to go. But now you're here in week 9, and that happens. You're like, okay, there should be some cohesiveness between him and those receivers, and on top of it, the defense that played lights out also didn't really show up in that game, which was strange to see. So it's really hard to get a read on Tom Brady this year because you don't know which one you're going to get. But with the Bucs, what did you think about them signing Antonio Brown? Was that a smart move?
You know, we talked about this a lot, you and I, about Antonio Brown.
Yeah.
And I'm going to continue to say no. I don't think it's a smart move. I don't think having Antonio Brown on your team, at least, you know, with the next 3 years or 4 years or so. I guess he's getting old, so I can't really give him that. But I don't think it's a good idea. I think he's going to break. I think something's going to happen, and he's going to create chaos in the locker room. He's not worth it, Patrick. No wide receiver. That's not true. Most wide receivers are not worth signing if they have a bad attitude. If they ruin your locker room, because man, if someone, you know, that can go south really quick. We saw it with the Oakland Raiders. I mean, it can go south really quick and just ruin things. So, no, I'm never going to be for it. I think he has all the talent in the world. But like I said, Patrick, wide receivers, you know, you just need a guy who runs good routes, who's fast, and catch the ball. That's all you need. And Antonio Brown, he does all those, but what comes with it is not worth it to me, and I'll always stand behind that. Interesting.
See, I've actually taken the angle this year where I bought in because it's Tom Brady and he's having to play babysitter, which I think he did a good job of in that one game, you know, when we saw with New England. And there was all that talk of, Antonio Brown came over and he's now going to be living with Tom Brady, and Tom Brady's taking him under his wing and all this. So I bought into that, but as I did, I knew that could come back to bite me before it's all said and done. So we'll see. They still have half a season to either prove one of us wrong here. But speaking of Brady, obviously his former team, you know, last night the Patriots, my goodness, they barely pull one out against the unbelievably awful New York Jets. And Cam Newton, it's just, speaking of you don't know who you're going to get, you know, he comes out in week 2 and just balls out. And we thought, wow, you know, Cam Newton, that looked like classic Cam Newton. Maybe he's back. And then since then, and since the COVID and he's come off, it's just been absolutely terrible. So with that being said, and the performance he put up last night wasn't great. I mean, he was much more accurate, but he didn't throw a touchdown. He ran for a couple. Is Cam officially done to you? Is there any juice left in the tank that we're either going to see this year, or if he signs with another team next year, or has his dominance in the NFL kind of ran its course?
Yeah, it's tough, Patrick. If I'm a GM for the Patriots, I'm tomorrow I get to sign something that says I'm the GM of the Patriots. I'm not having Cam Newton be my quarterback at the end of the year. I'll let him probably finish the year as my starting quarterback, but I think you got to draft somebody. I think you got to start fresh. I like Cam. I'm always going to like Cam, but like you said, he's inconsistent. The inconsistency is just brutal. And, you know, as a quarterback, you got to have a guy who each week's going to go out there and perform. I mean, Pat Mahomes. I mean, yeah, he has a few bad games here and there. Not really bad games, just not himself kind of games. Yeah. And, you know, he's consistent for most of the part. I mean, Drew Brees, he's pretty consistent for most of the part. Just on and on and on, guys like that. So, you know, Cam Newton's not that guy. He's not, and it's unfortunate because I like the guy. I think he's a good athlete. I may not have liked him when he was at Blinn, Texas, in JUCO because I saw him play. But I saw him play Butler County. That was a long time ago, though. But I don't think he should be the quarterback at the end of this year. I think he should probably sign with a different team. If he can sign a different team, I think the Patriots should move on at the end of the year. That's just me thinking. But again, the defense played pretty bad last night for the Patriots. They did awful. I think Joe Flacco just had 3 touchdowns. I mean, Jameson Crowder had a touchdown. They had that 50-yarder. So, I mean, defense didn't look good for the
Joe Flacco. Unbelievable, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. 2020, man.
It's true. He has no business, I thought, being in the NFL anymore. And yet last night the performance wasn't all that bad until the interception. You know, that was pretty much what sealed it. But yeah, it's Cam. This was an opportunity for him to come out and kind of show the rest of the league that he does deserve a deal next year, and I think it could have been a pretty lucrative one too had he performed like he did in week 2 mostly throughout the season. But man, it's taken a right turn. Let me ask you about I know you're a Rams fan, obviously, big time Rams guy, and this has been, I think, one of the more interesting teams overall this season. However, I described it earlier this year that their offense, if you think about what has happened since Sean McVay got there and since the Super Bowl year, since then, it seems like, I still think Sean McVay is an amazing coach, but since then, it seems like the offense has just gotten a little boring. They've really gotten to, we're going to run. We're not going to have as much flair, and maybe we take too long to get our weapons involved. But to you, is that a more of a kind of just a getting stagnant situation for the team, or is it maybe Jared Goff trying to hold some guys back here?
Pat, I think I'm going to dispute you. I think actually this year the offense finally looks like it's looking a lot better. I think getting rid of Todd Gurley was probably one of the best things the Rams could do. Now you don't have a lot of pressure handing the ball off to a guy who makes millions and millions of dollars. You don't have that pressure trying to feed him. Now you can do whatever you want, and I think the Rams can now do whatever they want. But at the same time, they just have games where they just look so bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, man, that Dolphins game, Pat, it was just
terrible.
Brutal. I had to turn it off.
Yeah.
The defense looked great. That's the thing. The defense played so good against Miami, but the offense, special teams, allowed Miami to win that game. With the 49ers, I mean, the offense couldn't click. So there's just some games every now and then where we just don't look ourselves. I still believe in the Rams. I still believe in Jared Goff. I'm always going to stand by that. I think Jared Goff's a good quarterback. I tell my friends sometimes, hey, I think he's a top 10 quarterback. They laugh in my face. But I think whenever he's on his game, he is an amazing quarterback. So I love the Rams. I think Sean McVay is amazing still. I'm not worried. I think they'll still go to the playoffs this year, but the NFC West is super competitive. It's very tough division, so who knows who's going to make it out of that division. I'm hoping the Rams are, but it's definitely a confusing year to say the least. Offensive line needs to get a little bit better for Jared Goff, though.
Well, to make you feel any better, I mean, coming into this year when we ranked our top quarterbacks, I did have Jared Goff in the top 10. I think he was my 10th overall because I believed in him. And that first year he came in, he looked amazing. But can we agree on maybe that at least at this point in his career, he's certainly overpaid? Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think he's probably a little overpaid. I still think he still has a lot of time to make up for that. I think he's still got plenty of time to, get his money's worth. We still have a long year to go. I still think the Rams' offense is one of the best in the country right now, maybe behind the Chiefs and maybe a few other teams. But I think it's still really good. I still think Jared Goff and Sean McVay can have a lot of room to grow. And one thing about the Rams that I love is that they're always going to be competitive. I mean, they're never going to just lay down. They're a very competitive team, and they hate losing. So I'm not too worried about it. I think Jared Goff and Sean McVay will get the offense going. It's going to be fine. We have plenty of weapons with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp. So yeah, not too worried.
Let me ask you one more thing here before I let you go, and it's got to be about my Kansas City Chiefs here. 8-1 on the season. The one loss to the Raiders, which still some people are kind of scratching their heads at that one. But they were still in the game, and then obviously they get a 2-point win over the Panthers on Sunday. But overall with this Chiefs team, have you kind of seen? Because the pattern I've seen and I've come to a conclusion is they really have played kind of to their competition this year, and they're that team, right, that can come out any week and do what they did against the Baltimore Ravens, which was one of the most dominating performances we've seen in a long time, or they can do kind of what they did against the Raiders and a little bit against the Panthers, which was just not play as tight of defense, and the offense is just kind of chugging along. But what's your take on the Super Bowl champs this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right on the spot. I think the Chiefs they definitely played to their opponent, and I think that could definitely maybe hurt them, close to playoff season whenever we're in the playoffs or whenever we get close to there. But there's a few teams. I mean, they got to worry about the Bills, I think, for sure. I think the Bills and Josh Allen looks good. I think they'll compete with them in the playoffs this year. But I think the Chiefs, I'm not going to worry about it too much. I think they're still a very, very, very probably the best team in the NFL. So, that's that. But again, they're struggling sometimes against these teams they should kill. And so, yeah. I think they'll figure it out for sure, especially when playoffs come. Maybe that'll all just go away. That could just be like a regular season feeling. Maybe they need to lose. Maybe the Chiefs need to lose a game. I feel like a team that just, is not that good and just, wear that, and then possibly the rest of the year they can just kill it. And so that might be a thing the Chiefs might need to do, because there's games where I watch the Chiefs and I'm like, you are not a Super Bowl team. And I think you probably said the same thing about them. I mean, you watch them play, especially that Raiders game. I mean, you watch that team and you're like, man, this is not a Super Bowl team. But then again, they play, like you said, the Ravens. I'm like, wow, this is one of the best teams I've seen. They're a weird team, but at the end of the day, they're still the Chiefs. They're still really good. They're still well coached. They still have one of the best quarterbacks in the game. I mean, it's hard to bet against them.
Yeah. I mean, they found a way to be 8-1, so I guess we'll take it, no doubt. Hank, I appreciate it as always, man. And I know you're a new dad, so you're pretty busy with all that. Congratulations again on that. That's so cool. But thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, Pat. I appreciate it, man.
All right, that's Hank Boulanger joining me here on the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network. Big 12 Fanatics podcast does a good job on that as well. You can find that where you listen to your podcast. When we come back and round out the show, I'm going to tell you what I learned on the Afternoon Sports Drive. That's next. Oh, Dez. He was actually activated and was on the sideline on Sunday against the Indianapolis Colts, but did not get into the game. So we'll see if that changes at all next week. I'm intrigued to see what he does when he gets out there on the field, because he will at some point. I'm really intrigued to see how that goes, as everybody else is. We're just about to round out the show here on the Afternoon Sports Drive with Patrick Wheeler. And before we do that, I'm about to tell you what I learned today.
The day is coming to an end. Time to find out if these two got any smarter.
The question is, what did you learn?
Let's find out what the guys learned today on the Afternoon Sports Drive.
Well, I learned something today.
Well, what I learned is that, looking back at the game with Tampa Bay and the Saints, is Tom Brady is absolutely, we've seen light and dark. We've seen day and night. And certainly he's going to be your quarterback that's still your dink and dunk type guy, and he's not afraid to do that all the way down the field, and he has done that for a while, the last few years, but it's still worked out, right? But this was a Saints team that knew that. They knew how to attack it, and the defense got after him. Defense really got after him. And we saw a Tom Brady like I haven't seen before kind of fold. I mean, that interception he threw up at the end, I haven't seen a throw that bad where it looked like he was literally just kind of tossing it up for grabs. And I almost thought to myself when he did that, I was like, did he just do that because he's just upset and that was just, here, take it, I don't want any more type thing? Like, it was that bad. It was that bad. But earlier this season, we saw a really good, somewhat vintage Tom Brady too. And I think the thing we need to see from him this year, if he wants to continue success and continue to have the Bucs on the path of maybe even getting to the Super Bowl, is you got to have a consistent Tom Brady. And I don't know if that's too much to ask for at his age. I think he still belongs in the NFL, but it is okay to acknowledge when he just isn't playing well. It's really easy to make up excuses for the GOAT, and I get it, but it's also okay to understand and point out, look, that was just a really bad game. Like, he just didn't play well. We could say, well, they didn't run the ball well. The defense barely showed up, and the offensive line was having a tough time. But I'm telling you right now, you go back and look at that game, and Tom Brady just did not play good. He just did not play a good game. And it was exposed on the national landscape and on Sunday Night Football, so that didn't help. But it's going to have to take a consistent Tom Brady for him to keep the Bucs relevant, no doubt. It really, really is. It all starts and ends with TB12. This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive, Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler. I appreciate everybody hopping on with me today. Rodger Wheeler, Frank Bonner as always, and then Hank Boulanger there in hour number 2. Good stuff. We'll be back here tomorrow. Tom Dorado will be on with me. And don't forget, coming up in after the show tomorrow with Where Are They Now, Tom Dorado will have Emmanuel Ogbah, former OSU stud, now with the Miami Dolphins, and he's having a heck of a season in the NFL, so it'll be a lot of fun to talk to. That's coming up at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Everybody have a fantastic Tuesday. This has been the Afternoon Sports Drive on the Triple Play Sports Radio Network with Patrick Wheeler. See you back here tomorrow.